Before I exited my e-commerce brand Bottle Keeper, I spent almost a decade dumping tens of millions of dollars into Facebook ads. Facebook was the entire engine behind almost everything we built, and after scaling that brand over 60 million in total sales with just 4 employees and no investors, I can tell you what actually made our ads work was not about the things most people obsess about, like creatives and click-through rates. So in this video, I'm just going to give you the full strategy that worked for us running an extremely profitable business on Meta ads and taking it well into the 8 figures as a result. Let's dive in. Set an ad budget that can actually get to break even or beyond. So the number one mistake I see in e-commerce brands with their Facebook ads is just entirely making up their ad budgets. Now, I'm not judging. I've done this myself and I understand why it happens. As brand owners, we see ad budget as purely an expense. It's like risk capital because, to be clear, it is capital at risk. But what we do as a result of that is we just sort of pick a number out of thin air, something that we're comfortable with, something we think we can afford to lose, and we just sort of hope that works. But because we haven't actually done the math on what our ads need to do to return in order to get to break even or hit a 5 or 10% net profit margin, we have no idea whether that ad budget even gives us a chance. And what I found working with other e-commerce brands through my company Pentane, which is a profit operating system built for Shopify brands and e-commerce companies, is that most of them are dramatically underspending on their Facebook ads and generally their ad budget as a whole. Now, this sounds backwards because it feels like spending less should make it safer, but it oftentimes is actually the opposite. When I started advising companies I'd invested in after selling Bottle Keeper, I kept seeing the same pattern. Brands running Facebook ads at a super high ROAS, like an 8, and they're still losing money, hemorrhaging capital every single month. And the reason is they're not driving enough total revenue to create enough contribution profit to pay for their fixed expenses. These things like payroll, rent, tech subscriptions, all these costs that exist whether or not you make money. And if you're not familiar with contribution profit, it is the magical metric. Contribution profit is equal to your revenue minus all of those sales related costs like cost of goods, shipping, fulfillment, credit card and Shopify fees, and ad budget. What's left contributes to the business. This is what pays for those fixed expenses. If you have more contribution profit than fixed expenses, what's left is your net profit. So contribution profit is the thing we need to grow. It's the answer to the question, are the changes we're making working or are they not? And where this can get confusing, but it's really important to understand, is that there's an inverse relationship between your ad budget and the ROAS you need to hit in order to get to break even or hit your net profit goals. Meaning the less you spend, the higher your ROAS needs to be. And at super low budgets, that number gets into territory that nobody is going to be able to hit. I'll give you an example. I had a brand come to Pentane. They had set their ad budget at $25,000 because that's just what they felt like spending. That's what they were comfortable with. When Pentane ran the math, their actual expenses in QuickBooks, all the stuff that goes into the system, it actually showed they needed to hit a 9.76 return on ad spend just to get to break even at that ad budget. And in the last 30 days, they were operating at a 3.91. So 9.76 was completely unrealistic. This means that the whole system was set up for failure before it even started. They were handing their ad agency 25 grand and essentially just saying, do good. But they got their P&L a month later and they lost money. Was that the agency's fault? No. They had built an ad budget on gut feel that was completely unrealistic. There was math involved, but nobody knew how to do it, so they didn't know what the outcome needed to be. So this changes the question from how much am I comfortable spending on Facebook to how much do I need to spend in order to get my needed return on ad spend in a range that we can actually hit, that becomes realistic. For that same brand, Pentane showed that they needed to spend about $58,000 at a 3.45 ROAS to get to break even. This was definitely more achievable, not super easy, but it's at least in a good range for their agency. And better yet, their agency now actually knows what good means. They've defined it. There's a line in the sand and it's 3.45 ROAS. You need to know that number so that you can build towards it. You can create structure around it. And so you can pull in all these other levers in the business that you have at your disposal to try to bring that needed ROAS down, what that minimum needs to be. And that's what we'll go into next. The relationship between your ad budget and your needed return on ad spend to hit your goal, if you put it on a graph, it looks like an upside down hockey stick. It follows a curve that's called a negative log curve. As your Facebook ad budget or your entire ad budget goes up, the needed return on ad spend to hit your net profit goal comes down. And at first it comes down really fast and then it levels off. The reason for this is that as you put in more ad budget and you generate more revenue, even though each dollar might be slightly less efficient, you're creating more of that contribution profit to cover your fixed expenses. So it's okay that your ROAS comes down as long as you're doing it with scale, because the total dollars actually flowing into the business are increasing. The key is understanding where those lower limits are, where the minimum ROAS needs to be given the ad budget that you've set. A lot of people see this ROAS dip when they get to increasing ad spend and they panic. And the reality is the business might be healthier at a lower ROAS with a higher budget than it ever had been before. So this should completely change change how you go about your Facebook ad spend strategy, because once you see it this way, your Facebook ad budget isn't just an expense anymore. It becomes fuel for the engine inside your company. By the way, if you want to see exactly what your Facebook ad budget needs to be and what ROAS you need to hit based on your specific business numbers and net profit goals, this is exactly what Pentane does. Let me actually just show you the system real quick. So when you get into Pentane, yes, we have a dashboard. No, I don't think the world needs more dashboards, but we do have a lot of important metrics in here that cover the base from the financial side of the business and the customer acquisition revenue, how we actually make money side of the business. The important things to look at inside of Pentane are this graph. This is that negative log curve that I talked about. What's important here is the first thing we do is we set our net profit goal. In this case, we use a 10% net profit margin. And this lever here is our input. This allows us to control the ad spend. So you can see as we're dragging the ad spend to the right, we're moving down this log curve. This relationship here is the ad spend versus our return on ad spend. So as we increase our ad budget, that needed return on ad spend to hit a 10% net profit goes down. This is how it works for every single company on the planet. It's just the way the math works. The interesting thing though is, as you can see, ad budget is increasing. At the same time, our needed return on ad spend, that's our minimum, that's our floor, is decreasing, but the amount of net profit being created is increasing. This is a little bit mind-blowing, but it's the way that the math works when you understand it and you have these guardrails in place. Even more importantly, we have other levers that we can pull. We can see what happens if we increase our prices 10%. It makes it much easier. It tells us how our conversion rate on our website can change. Anything about that is net positive. Return on ad spend can come down. It's one of the big levers we can pull. What happens if we go in the other direction though? Maybe we do a 10% discount. How does the math inside the business need to change so that that discount isn't a disaster? Then we get into what happens as we're making these changes and being able to watch that contribution profit over time. There are a lot of options in these filters we don't need to look at now, but being able to look at your total contribution profit over time and put a trend line on it is the answer to the question, is it working or not? As that trend line is up, it is working. Things are positive. They are moving in the right direction. If it goes flat, we're treading water. If it starts to go down, we're in trouble and we need to look at other things in the business and other levers we might pull to improve that. So if you want to try this out for your brand, the link is in the top of the description. Now back to the video. Make every dollar of ad spend more profitable without changing a single campaign. So now that you have the ad budget strategy, the next thing to understand is that there are levers you can pull outside of the ads manager that directly lower the ROAS your Facebook campaigns need to hit. This is where most e-commerce brands leave tons and tons of money on the table because they're trying to squeeze better performance out of their campaigns when the faster fix is actually on the side of the business not related to Facebook. There are three specific levers you can pull here. The first and the absolute biggest one is your product pricing. When you increase your prices, your contribution margin increases, which means every dollar of revenue that comes in from those Facebook ads is contributing more to the business. And that directly lowers your return on ad spend that is needed by your campaigns in order to be profitable and beyond. And I know the gut reaction to raising prices is generally, ouch, my customers can't handle it. It's going to crush conversion rates. And sometimes it doesn't. I can tell you from personal experience that that's not how it always plays out. Sometimes conversion rate doesn't change at all or just barely moves. As an example, you may have seen when I showed a demo of Pentane that as you change pricing in the product, whether you increase it or you do a sale and you decrease it, it will tell you the amount that the conversion rate needs to change in order for that to be net positive. So if you increase prices 10%, your conversion rate might drop from a current 1.5 to 1.3, meaning anything above 1.3 is net positive to the business. It's adding contribution profit to the business. The key is just knowing where those limits are. Either way, you test it, you watch the data, and you let the numbers tell you where the ceiling is, not your emotions, not your gut feeling. The second massive lever is the fixed costs inside of your business. Now, the way that this works is that every dollar you spend on fixed costs comes directly out of net profit, meaning every dollar you save on fixed costs goes directly into net profit. And the way that the math works inside the business, it's actually deep down in the math, the explanation for that negative log hockey stick curve is that every additional dollar that you make that has contribution profit built into it, let's say it's 10 cents of every dollar is contribution profit, that's called your contribution margin, is going to pay for those fixed expenses. If your fixed expenses come down, you need less contribution profit in order to cover them because there are fewer of them being spent. The result of which is that your needed return on ad spend at a given ad budget also comes down. It is dramatically easier inside of a business to cut fixed expenses to impact net profit than it is to drive additional revenue to impact net profit at the same amount. So look at your fixed expenses. $1 saved here is literally $1 earned. And the third lever is actually two levers: your on-site conversion rate and your average order value. If the same amount of traffic from your Facebook campaigns converts at a higher rate on your site, your ROAS goes up automatically. You're sending the same clicks from the same campaigns and spending the same budget, but more of those people are spending money on your website. The way to approach this is through constant testing of your copy, the images, your page, your layout, the buttons, the checkout flows, all the things. There's lots of apps and tools to help you do this, but you want to test one variable at a time, because if you change the header copy and the button color at the same time, it's going to be impossible to tell which one is influencing the customers. And looking at AOV, if a customer is spending more per order, the revenue driven by those Facebook ad dollars goes up, even though, again, you spent the same amount of money to acquire that customer. Now, there are a lot of ways to do this, like bundling products, adding complementary things in the checkout flow, volume-based pricing, all these things that we can talk about till our heads fall off. And at the end of the day, though, when your AOV goes up, your ROAS goes up with it, because the more revenue, same amount of ad dollars, it's just the way the math works. So it's not about making more per order, it's about making your entire ad strategy and Facebook acquisition process easier, because the higher ROAS gives us more room to pay to acquire customers. Creative strategy. Now, on the other side of this is your creative, because no matter how dialed in your numbers are, your ad performance entirely depends on your creatives. Of course, I have some perspective on this from spending tens of millions of dollars on Facebook ads over the course of almost a decade at BottleKeeper. When we first launched, we couldn't sell the product with static images. It just looked like a water bottle. Nobody cared about it. It was when Facebook launched their video ad platform in the summer of 2014 that we could actually show what the product did, could show it in action. So I shot a super simple video on the beach with a camera propped up on a backpack, and that single video drove more than $10 million in revenue over the course of a couple of years. And I didn't make a second version of it for like 5 years because we could at that time. Now, the takeaway from that isn't to shoot a cheap video and hope it goes viral. It's that the creative that worked was the one that clearly demonstrated the product and what it did and why someone should care about it. That principle absolutely holds true today, even though the platform is completely different now. Now, let's talk about creative today, because it has changed an awful lot in the last few years. The biggest shift is that Meta's algorithm, called Andromeda, has basically flipped how ads get discovered. It used to be that your targeting settings did all of the heavy lifting. Now your creative is the targeting. Meta's AI and their underlying infrastructure looks at your images and your videos, and it decides who to show them to based on what it sees. So if your creative doesn't clearly communicate who the product is for and why they should care about it, the algorithm doesn't know what to do with it. It's just not going to get delivered the way that you want it to get delivered. So that means creative is no longer just the marketing team's job. It is literally the single biggest lever that you have inside of your ads manager today. There's data showing that 70 to 80% of your ad performance comes from creative quality, not your budget, not your targeting, not your settings. The number one thing that we're seeing work right now, and this is true across almost any e-com brand that we talk to, is volume and variety. The days of finding one single ad and running it for 6 months or 3 years like we did is long gone. Meta's algorithm regards creative diversity, and it actually penalizes you if you're running the same visual with just slightly different text overlays. It sees that as the same ad, and your CPM costs go up, which means your ROAS comes down. So you need a system for producing creative consistently. I'm talking 8 to 20 new variations a month, depending on your ad spend level. And that sounds like a lot, but it doesn't mean you need 20 separate productions. It just means you need to take a winning concept, vary the hook, change the opening 3 seconds, test different creators, try different formats, and let the algorithm sort out which version is the win for your audience. Now, let's talk about user-generated content versus product content. UGC still works, but the old playbook is dead. If you're running your ring light testimonials where someone just talks about how awesome your product is and how it changed their life, that stopped converting quite some time ago. Everyone has seen that video 10,000 times. Our brains just don't even process it anymore. We go right past it. What's working now is more authentic. I call it authentic performance creative. It's native, it's authentic, it feels real, and there has to be strategy behind it. Think product demos showing the thing in action, founder-led content talking directly to the camera on why you built this, what your passion is about this. People see that and they believe it and they love it. Think of it like this. It needs to first educate and entertain before it sells. Honestly, the founder content is one of the most underused formats that we see. And you as the brand owner talking about why you made the product and the problem that it solves, what makes it different, it performs incredibly well because people connect with it. Again, it's authentic. They don't want to hear from brands anymore. People want to hear from people. And that generally costs you nothing. On short form versus long form content, short form is the king for prospecting. You have about 3 seconds to get somebody's attention to keep them from scrolling. You have somewhere between 15 to 30 seconds is being the sweet spot for cold traffic. For retargeting, longer form form content can work really, really well. And this could be 60 to even more than 90 seconds because those people, they already know you, they already know your brand, they're much further down the funnel, so they're stickier. The format that matters right now is generally vertical video, like think 4x5s and 9x16s, bold captions baked into the video. Most people watch with the sound off. So if your creative doesn't work on mute, it doesn't work. And one more thing on creative, you need to be refreshing your ads every 2 to 4 weeks at least. Creative fatigue is a serious thing. It hits a lot faster than it used to with how the things move through the algorithms. The typical lifespan of UGC today for a given ad is generally 14 to 18 days before performance absolutely drops. So if you don't have a pipeline of new creative coming in, you're going to see a cost spike and wonder what happened. But here's what I want you to understand about creative in the context of everything else we've talked about in this video. Your creative is what gets people to your site, but everything we covered before that determines whether that click actually turns into profit. The best creative in the world can't save you if your ad budget is set wrong or your margins are an absolute disaster. You're running discounts that make everything impossible. So get your creative right, yes, but don't make the mistake of thinking that it's the whole strategy or it's going to save you from all these other problems. Know exactly when to scale your spend and when to pull it back. So at this point, you've got 3 strategies. Your budget is set from real math. You're pulling levers outside Ad Manager to lower what your campaigns need to achieve from a ROAS standpoint, and you know how to approach your creative. The last piece is knowing when to actually scale those ads and when to pull them back. Now, most brands answer this by looking at ROAS inside of the Ads Manager. If ROAS is up, they spend more. If ROAS is down, they spend less. The problem is that the ROAS you see inside the Ads Manager isn't giving you the big picture on what Facebook is actually doing, because Facebook's reporting is built on an attribution system that is an absolute joke. It was broken before Apple started blocking all the pixels. Now it is basically non-existent. Facebook is doing their best guess to try to give you a number, and you cannot use that as the truth for what is happening in your Facebook ad budget relative to what's ending up on your website. Now you can use the platform ROAS as a baseline, watching how it moves, but do not take it seriously. If you're selling on other platforms like Amazon or you have wholesale accounts, people are going to see the Facebook ads and then buy on other platforms like Amazon, like your retail stores, like on Google Shopping. But in this case, even your total direct consumer return on ad spend is an incomplete number. At BottleKeeper, we knew that our Facebook ads were driving traffic from our partnership with Ace Hardware, for example. We knew that when someone walked into a store and they saw BottleKeeper on the shelf, they knew what that was because of social media. They were seeing it on Facebook. Now, there's obviously no way to see that in the Ads Manager. No one is going to tell you that that's what's happening. This is why we track something called MER, which stands for Marketing Efficiency Ratio. It's just your total revenue divided by your total ad spend. At BottleKeeper, we call this global ROAS. MER gives you a much better, more honest picture about what your ad spend is doing and how it's impacting the entire business, not just the platform level ROAS reported inside of Facebook. If your MER is healthy and trending in the right direction, your Facebook ads are likely doing their job, filling that top of funnel, even if the in-platform ROAS doesn't look great. But even MER has its limits, because the real answer to the question of whether you should scale your ad budgets or you should pull them back comes down to that one number, contribution profit. As a reminder, contribution profit is your revenue minus all the variable or sales-related costs associated with earning that revenue. Cost of goods, shipping, fulfillment, credit card and Shopify fees, and your ad budgets. Whatever is left is the money that goes to cover your fixed expenses, and anything left after that is your net profit. So if you increase your ad budget and your contribution profit goes up, your ads are working. Even if ROAS came down a little bit, the total dollars flowing into the business increased, which means your ads are doing their job. If you increase your budget and contribution margin stays flat or drops, that's your signal to probably pull back and look at what other levers you can pull inside the business to take some pressure off that ROAS. Now, most brands don't find out whether a scaling decision worked until they get their P&L from their bookkeeper or accountant a month or two from now, which is way beyond after it matters. By then, if it didn't work, you've been bleeding money for weeks or frankly even months and you didn't know it. So you want to be watching how that contribution profit trends in real time so you can see whether it's increasing over the course of a couple of weeks or a month based on the ad spend changes that you're making inside of the business. You want to see this change while it's changing, not after the fact when it's too late. Think of this just like a trend line. Going back to that trend line, if contribution profit is moving up week over week, you have room to keep pushing on that ad budget. If it starts to flatten out, or you may have found a ceiling. If it's upside down, you're in trouble. You need to look at other levers and things you can do inside the business and realistically pull back the ad budget to take some pressure off the ad systems as well. Now, if you're running an e-commerce brand and you'd rather just know exactly what your budget needs to be and what the ROAS needs to be in order to hit your net profit goals without having to think about it or do a bunch of complex math, go to pentane.com. you can use the first link in the description. It connects all your financial data and your revenue and your marketing data, and it just tells you what the numbers need to be. So again, you can use the first link below to try it out. And if you want to see the full story of how I scaled my own brand Bottle Keeper to over 60 million in total sales, watch this next video.